All right. Before we get back to tests, as I was, watching again and editing the first part of this video last night when I reached to the point where I was explaining the lifespan, I was like, wait a second, and I realized that I wasn't properly closing the database. So that's what I added. I added this method close DB connection that under the hood just posts on the engine, which closes. I guess it's not such a big deal with SQLite, that's why I kind of didn't realize it. But if I was using something like Postgres running in production somewhere in the cloud, this properly closes the connection, so there's not some dangling connection that would only shut down at a timeout or whatever. They also claim that this properly closes all possible pending transactions and that kind of stuff. I don't assume there should be any. They should be all encapsulated in things handled by FastAPI, like routes and or those tasks that run after a route, or handled by the lifecycle of whatever you're using for queues and stuff. And also, again, if we refer to the source code of Polar, this is the same thing, and as you can see here, they start the database engine, and here's the yield, and here's the shutdown process part where they do the same thing. They just have both sync engine and async engine. I'm not sure what they're using the sync engine for, but okay, so with that this out of the way, let's get back to tests. And this I have tests for profile and tests for organization endpoints. This profile, I will go into details in a bit, but the high-level overview is we do like sanity check that there's no profiles currently in the database. Then we do a post request to create a profile. We check that the response returned 200 as expected, and that it returned the data as expected. After that, we go straight to the database to check that there's now one profile and one organization. This is we mock, if you remember the analytics service, it has a method to track an event, which is not async, that's in purpose. Kind of what analytics services tend to do is that they just kind of synchronously shove it somewhere, and then they're like periodically synchronously uploading it, which is one thing you should do during the shutdown process. And then I have identified, and I have that async, that okay, that's something that you want immediately to upload to the internet. And what we're doing here is that we mock it. Yeah, sometimes it freaks out like this, which is extremely annoying. I usually need to like close Visual Studio and then run it again to make these go away. But yeah, since Python is a dynamic language and you can mock pretty much anything, you can batch an object. And what I'm doing is that I'm kind of mocking the identify method on that object. And then yeah, then what you can do is we inject this actually returns the mock for the method that we inject here using these fixtures, which is something that works in a very similarly to dependency injection in FastAPI has. This the same thing, just managed by PyTest and not FastAPI. Oh, come on. And then we can check that this was weighted once, because it's an async method, you need to weight it. Then we check that when we do the post again, it actually returns data as expected. Get does, the same as expected, and then we check that we delete a profile, we get the appropriate code, and we check the database that all the profiles and organizations are out. Here we check that when we call this is an invalid token, it returns expected status code and some stuff related to it. That's the gist of it. Then, as you can see, we're also injecting some test client and database session. Things that should be shared between test cases are in here. This is the test client. This is a fixture that takes care of the life cycle for test, where I nuke the database before each test to start with the clean slate. It's basically deletes all the tables from it and stuff. And as you can see, there's this scope functions that this should be run before and after every function. I could optimize this to I don't know, create the database only at the beginning of test suite and only like delete all the data from the tables instead of just looking at the database, something like that. But I think this is fine for now. And there's this auto closure, which means that it gets automatically injected into every test case, even though, as you can see, it's not explicitly injected here. So another thing is that this test actually may not be that easy to read, and it does several things. It calls post once, then it calls post again, then it calls get, then it calls delete. And I just shoved it in like one test case. But what I'm used to and what I usually like to do is this thing, do like kind of nest the tests. This is a thing often called as BDD, like business. Yeah, behavior-driven development, which is kind of like you nest tests, like given some initial tests, when I create an user, then something should happen, and then you kind of continue from this state. When I call the post again, then something should happen, and again then you can be kind of nesting things and branching out. And PyTest seems to have this BDD plugin where I mean, this is nice, but I would like an example of tests that are actually nested. You can do this table test. That's fine, but I don't see what I'm particularly looking at. We can try Copilot. Give me an example of what a VLMs would look like using my okay, let's see what it generates. Well, not quite what I was expecting, but yeah, I need to take a closer look. Maybe there's some better tools than Python BDD. Anyway, what I'm trying to achieve is that you usually like, yeah, I would like to, especially this profile one, I would like to. I think that this is a way to make tests, big test chunks like this one more readable. And okay, then the same thing with organizations. We already saw like the client and database. Fine, I create a profile, which is something that could probably be put in a fixture because it's at the beginning of every test here. We always needed to start with at least one profile. So yeah, this tests that an organization was successfully created, that it's in the database. This could be one line, but I guess this is how Claude generated it when I prompted it. But you know, in here I'm doing the same thing on one line, so yeah, I could refactor it. And these are validations for Pydantic, basically. If we go back to organization and we look at organization create, you can see that the name needs to be at least 1 character long and no longer than 100 characters. So these are tests for that. Test unauthorized. Test getting organization by ID. We try to fetch an organization ID that doesn't exist. We try to fetch an organization that belongs to another user, or like where I'm not, that belongs to another user, where I'm not a member of, where the relationship isn't there. Like examples, this is test for that pagination. I mostly have this generated by Claude here. Actually, did a decent job at that. And yeah, that's all I have here. So yeah, that's it for the. I guess that's all I wanted to show at this point. This repo is publicly available on GitHub. I will link to it in the description, I guess. And yeah, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.